Hello, my name is Professor Cynthia Zeiden. I'm here today to give you a talk about gender norms and gender dysphoria in the anime series Ranma 1/2, a very beloved anime series. And here's the OVA and movies. So I'm a huge fan of Ranma 1/2, but I have a lot to tell you about the series today. Okay. Okay, so here we are exploring gender roles and gender dysphoria in the Ranma 1/2 anime series. So this talk and this paper will cover the basics of the series Ranma 1/2, the gender roles in Ranma 1/2, the idea of gender dysphoria being exhibited in Ranma 1/2, a little bit of a content analysis of the very first episode of the series, and then a conclusion. So the very basics is that Ranma 1/2 started out as a manga series that ran in Weekly Shonen Sunday. So it was run in a comic book that was aimed for young boys. And this manga series ran from 1987 through 1996. It then became an anime series that ran on television from 1989 through 1992. It was created by Rumiko Takahashi, who had also created a lot of other very famous series like Urusei Yatsura and Inuyasha. She was a trailblazer. She was prolific. She was a female manga artist who just took off, and her stories were so famous, so popular. So Natsumi Fusanosuke wrote about Takahashi. Although she was a woman, she debuted in a boys manga magazine, and then she became the trailblazer for a totally new trend in the world of shonen manga. And then she brought about a new genre for both manga and anime. So basically, this new genre was the cross-dressing genre. So I wanted to show you, before I get into some heavy data and information about this series, I wanted to give you a brief photo gallery so that you could kind of see who I'm talking about and have that in your mind, and you can understand the concepts visually here. So Ranma 1/2 is a huge ensemble series. There's probably about 50 characters in it. And because it's such a huge series, the only characters that I'm going to focus on in this talk are the two main characters, Ranma and Akane. One more shot at the huge ensemble. So Ranma is a 16-year-old teenage boy who trains in martial arts with his father. They go to China and they train at a place of cursed, basically hot springs, where different people and creatures died in these various hot springs by drowning. And so if you train there and you happen to fall in one of the hot springs, you will turn into whatever it was that drowned in there when you hit cold water. And then when you have hot water poured over you, you go back to your original form. That is the mythology. That is the mythos of the Ranma 1/2 world. So right here we see the original boy Ranma, who went to the Chinese springs with his father to train. And this is what Ranma looks like when he hits cold water and becomes his girl form. Right there. So they're both wearing the Chinese clothes. But as you see, when Ranma turns into a girl, all of a sudden the hair color turns red. All of a sudden there's a female body, which is a very well-built female body, which is actually a big joke of the whole series, is that she's built way better than any of the other women in the story, and she brags about it quite a bit. Now, this is the love interest of Ranma, Akane. And Akane and Ramna are, as you will hear later, are forced to be engaged to one another by their fathers. So you can see here, Akane has a very feminine side, beautiful young girl. She's also 16 years old in high school, but Akane is also a man-eater. She beats up every single boy that shows her any attention very violently, and she is known as an extremely violent girl. So she's got two sides to her. She certainly does not fit into the traditional Japanese women's role whatsoever. So let's see the two of them together. Akane really can't stand the boy Ramna, but she doesn't mind the girl Ramna at all. She feels very safe with the girl Ramna. So there's just some depictions to show you that attitude. So now let's get into the meat of it. So the actual story I kind of alluded to you of this whole thing. And this basically from Ting Yu Cheng, a scholar, writes that one possible reason that Ramna 1/2 is so popular is that the stories not only include elements of fighting, and there's a lot of fighting, but also mock the romantic form of shoujo manga, which is the teenage girls form of manga, and the societal expectations in Japanese society. He was not born with this condition, meaning Ranma. Also, because he lives in a very strict society, he had to learn how to approach the societal expectations of a different gender. The ways he learned to switch between masculine and feminine becomes a main point in Ranma 1/2. So when we start the story, Ranma and his father have just returned from those cursed springs in China back to Japan to Ramna's father Genma's best friend's home, the Tendo's home. And so Ramna is just pretty much just beginning to understand and get used to the fact that he now half the time is a girl. He's very upset about this happening, and all he wants to do is do whatever he can to get this curse off of him so that he doesn't keep turning into a girl all the time. So this is the basic whole story of the entire series, is about him going from a boy to a girl and a girl to a boy, and him trying to find a cure for this. So if you add on top of all of this, that all of a sudden now his father and the Tendo girl's father have decided to make a match for marriage. And so now you're forcing this whole traditional kind of construct into this extremely non-traditional situation that we've got going on here. So another scholar, Meredith Suzanne Hahn Aquila, wrote that being a proud young man, Ramna is understandably mortified and eager to regain his full masculinity. However, he is forced to put his plans on hold when his father, Satome Genma, reveals that long ago he betrothed Ramna to the daughter of an old friend, Tendo Saun. Now that Ramna is 15, sometimes he's referred to as 15, sometimes 16, it is time for him to meet his fiancée. Akane is immediately elected because she is the same age as Ramna, and she hates men, and Ramna is only a half man. Thus begins a bitter engagement between two unwilling partners. So you throw this situation into an already very awkward situation. So let's look at some of the gender roles that we have going on in Ramna. So Lisa Goldstein and Molly Phelan basically wrote about what was Ramna's inner nature even before this curse happened. And they write, in Romiko Takahashi's Ramna 1/2, a splash of water turns Ramna into a girl. In this world, the other gender is very accessible and gender identity is not fixed. Ranma's femininity is non-existent or buried deep inside of him. Instead, it is barely below the surface, waiting for the smallest prompt to manifest itself. So what they're saying is that this is pretty much a metaphor for what Ramna really is, which Ramna has some genuine feminine identification inside of him that he wasn't really aware of until this. Let's look at the women. So on traditional Japanese gender roles for women, Yu states, women were expected to demonstrate obedience and live as an accessory to male members of the family. After centuries of female imprisonment, women were eager to free themselves under the impact of Western politics and culture. Yu goes on to explain, similarly, the conflict between marriage and career has become one of the salient problems for gender equality in Japan. Staying single for Japanese women is still seen as non-traditional or abnormal. So we find out that Akane does not want to get married, hates boys, doesn't want any part of this. She's very aggressive. She's very violent. She's very willful. She doesn't hide her feelings. There's nothing delicate about Akane. So she doesn't fit into this stereotype whatsoever. Even before Ramna comes into her life, she does not fit into this traditional woman stereotype. What is she? She's a tomboy. She's very beautiful on the outside, but she's tough and strong like a man on the inside. She breaks Japanese social norms for women. She is aggressive, quick to anger, loud, and she beats up boys violently, and lots of them at a time. This turns Ramna off from her as he continuously complains that she is uncute when she acts masculinely. She does not show her tender feminine side very often at all. Akane is completely forced to marry Ranma by her father. She goes along with it, even though she doesn't want to. Ironically, it must be because Ramna is a half girl that Akane even considers marrying Ramna at all, which is interesting. If Ramna was just a normal boy, it would probably be out of the question for Akane. But because Ramna has this crazy curse, it actually makes it possible for Akane to possibly marry Ramna. Now let's look at Akane as an archetype of a battling beauty. Mari Kotani seemed to have Akane Tendo in mind when writing her article, Metamorphosis of the Japanese Girl, the hyper girl, and the battling beauty. The following passage describes Akane's personality perfectly, and the reason why every man wants her who sees her. The battling beauty is a child full of perversity. While ordinary girls are frequently seen as incapable of fighting and thus as nothing more than inanimate things, the battling beauty proves as aggressive as any boy. Yet, she does not seem to hold out any hope or desire for liberation. The battling beauty is a beauty, which configures her in a relation to the boy's desires. Thus, she may function as a mirror of boys' desires for their liberation. So Akane is indeed beautiful and attracts boys, but she's also extremely strong, practices martial arts all the time, is just on the top of her game. So that's her, a battling beauty. She's a fantastic example of this female type. Let's talk about Ramna's actual gender dysphoria, and let's talk about what dysphoria is, gender dysphoria is. So Yoshiko Okuyama wrote in their article, Gender Identity Disorder, Gender Dysphoria, states, the term genderqueer is used to describe individuals who feel their gender identity does not fit into the socially ascribed heterosexual binary norms. It refers to an identity that falls somewhere on the spectrum of all gender identities. Thus, a genderqueer is a person who identifies with neither of the conventional gender distinctions. Then goes on to write, Trans and genderqueer people in Japan face unique issues from a sociocultural perspective. Will an increased number of LGBTQ manga titles in the market help create a more inclusive atmosphere in society? That is the big question here. Okuyama says, I strongly believe so, even if the positive, non-villain, and serious, non-super crypt representation of trans characters has just commenced. Well, not true, because Ranma1 has put Ramna up front as a transgender character decades ago. So Ramna is genderqueer. Let's talk about this. The series frames the gender dysphoria as a curse, and basically a curse that Ramna has to be humiliated over. And Ramna just wants to go back to normal and find some kind of way to get rid of the curse. But Ramna has no choice but to deal with this reality. And Ramna eventually, over time, gets comfortable with having both of these identities and sees both the really great things about being a girl and the really horribly challenging things about being a girl, because he half the time is a girl himself. So what is Ramna's reaction to gender dysphoria? Just like I just said. First, very upset about this. Then he sees there's some perks, like getting free food because guys think you're so cute. Also, though, everyone in the whole show has had their hands all over Ramna's feminine breasts, except for Ramna's father, thank goodness, Genma. Not seen him do that, but even Akane has done this in public to Ranma. But at the end, he accepts his fate because he cannot undo the curse that was put on him. So I looked at the entire first episode of the TV series because I wanted to look at how the writers set this whole story up to go for 161 television episodes, 11 original video animation episodes, and 3 full-length feature movies on Ramna. That's hundreds and hundreds of hours of the Ranma story. So in the first episode, this is what I found going over it very carefully. In the beginning of it, we find out Ramna does not want to get engaged because his father's dragging him to the Tendo house to get him betrothed to one of the daughters. And Ramna does not want to do this. Ramna screaming, fighting, anything Ramna can do for this not to happen. Ramna absolutely does not want this to happen. But his father, Genma, forces him, literally, physically forces him to do this. On the other hand, in the Tendo household, we meet Saon, the father, the single father, and his 3 daughters. And the youngest is Akane, and she is this tomboy who is in the dojo practicing her martial arts constantly, who hates boys. She absolutely does not want to get married at all. But both Ranma and Akane do accept that their fathers want them to be engaged. And so they move forward as if they are an engaged couple. They are embarrassed about it. They're not screaming it from the rooftops, but they've begrudgingly accepted this fate. Interestingly, in this first episode, Akane first meets Ramna as the girl Ramna and actually really likes Ranma and asks Ramna to go to the dojo with her, and then asks her if she wants to have a fight with her. So she even asks girl Ramna if she wants to be friends, and Ramna says yes. So then they go to the dojo, Akane and girl Ramna, and Akane tries her moves out on girl Ramna, and girl Ramna just ducks. Doesn't hurt her, just avoids all her attacks. Then Akane says, oh, well, I'll get you then. And she goes, oh, and she starts running. And then Ramna just jumps up, and Akane's whole arm goes through the wall of the dojo. And then Ramna lands right behind her and gently touches her forehead with her finger. And Akane knows she's been defeated, and Ramna laughs. Akane laughs, and Akane said, "Thank God you're not a boy." And Ramna says, "Why?" She says, "Because I couldn't stand losing to a boy." And this is before Akane even knows that Ramna actually is a boy and a girl. So then Akane comes up with this realization when Ramna goes into the hot bath, and upon having hot water, girl Ramna turns into boy Ramna. So Ramna has now turned into a boy in the hot water in the bath. Akane is coming into the bath naked because she thinks Ramna's a girl and she doesn't mind going in there with Ramna as a girl. She walks in naked. She sees male Ramna naked. She closes the door and screams because she's so mortified. And she has no idea who this boy is that's in her bathroom. And all kinds of craziness happens. None of the girls knew who this boy is. So finally, Genma, the father, explains to the Tendos the whole story of what's happened and why Ramna's going back and forth between boy and girl. So after that's done, Akane's father says, "Well, that's not so bad. At least you're a boy half the time. Marry one of my 3 daughters." And so weirdly enough, it's the 2 older daughters who decide and say Akane should marry him because they're the same age and because she hates boys, and Ramna's only half a boy. And so Akane complains, but she goes along with it very begrudgingly. So this whole first episode set the perfect tone for the rest of the whole series and the rest of the franchise. Because it's all about, can Ramna accept his new normal of being a girl half the time and being a boy half the time and everything that comes along with it, because so many complications and crazy things happen because of this. At the same time, can Akane accept marrying a person who is half the time a boy and half the time a girl? It's also about Akane's acceptance of it and Ramna's acceptance of it as well. The big message of this series was basically showing acceptance of non-traditional gender roles and gender dysphoria in the 1980s, decades before it was openly talked about. It gave non-binary people a welcome place to see people like themselves represented, and that was very, very important since they really couldn't see this representation really anywhere else this early. So it makes this a very, very important series. So I hope you enjoyed that presentation. I'll always love this series, Ramna 1/2. If you're interested in any of these kind of issues, I recommend that you watch it. It is available to watch on Hulu. And I think there are some episodes, but not maybe all of them on YouTube. But this is a very famous series, so it should be very easy to find if you would like to watch it. So I hope you learned a lot from this talk, and take good care and keep enjoying anime. Bye-bye.